All right, everyone. So I think you're looking at the OBS system right now if you're joining us again. We just got cut off due to a massive power outage, and we're trying to set everything back up again. Sorry for that. Hope y'all do understand. We unfortunately cannot control the electrical grid, and so sometimes things like that sadly happen. But let me try and get my control room set up again. And we'll be sitting here for a minute or two and waiting for everyone to come back, because sadly we've had a lot of trouble with this tonight. So give me just a second, everyone. We're just trying to get everything put together behind the scenes and also give everyone a moment to come back. All right, so we're just waiting here for a second. If you were just joining, we are giving it about a minute or two, so that way a lot of people can join back, so that way we can then continue the stream and hopefully have some people watching. Usually when this happens, we only get a small percentage of people who were thrown off coming back. So if you do know any of them, and you do know any of their friends, please make sure to let them know that we are once again back up and the stream is running again. I'm also going to put out a notification on Discord that we've had a small issue, but the stream is back up and running. So let me do that real quick. Y'all are about to see a little bit of my behind the scenes work. Small outage, but we have now resumed streaming. And we'll put that out there real quick. So I think that will probably, hopefully people see that. I hate the power outages, and they're terrible, and they like just irk me to no end. Because, you know, the streams, of course, are kind of supposed to be a continuous thing, and so having it just abruptly cut off is just annoying. So we're going to give it a few more seconds, and then we're going to continue on the stream. Get a generator. I would get a generator, but that would not stop the Wi-Fi from turning off. And I guess we'll start here. So with that, we can now see footage of the Foreign Legion using a javelin in the area of Kharkiv and hitting Russian units. And so here's the video. We now see the Ukrainian forces moving forward. I don't know why people keep on slowing down the footage, at least the sound in the footage. We now see them sitting behind a berm with the javelin. And we see this guy was rocking the Cossack haircut. Take a look at that. That is raw Cossack haircut. We can see them looking into the distance. We can see the Russian tank right there that they're about to hit with the javelin. We now see them lining up the javelin and preparing to fire. The javelin's now on its way straight to the tank. And now we can hear them laying down a little bit of fire with a machine gun. And it sounds like the javelin got a direct hit, but sadly we couldn't see it because, of course, they had to start running, so that way the tank couldn't fire at them. We now see the smoldering wreck of that Russian tank in the distance as they're now walking away like it was some kind of a drive-by shooting. But of course, an interesting video, and it is showing that there is pressure being exerted on that Kharkiv pocket, at least to a small degree. I don't think it's any kind of a counterattack, but it does appear that they're trying to inflict a maximum amount of casualties and a maximum amount of disarray and damage to the Russian forces here in this northern Kharkiv salient, so that way they can ensure that the Russians can never get their footing back in this area and try and push another offensive out of there. With that, we're now going to move down into the city of Kharkiv itself, where you can actually see some pretty, I guess you could say, distressing pictures of people who've been living in bomb shelters since pretty much the very start of this war. These people, when the first bomb started to fall on Kharkiv, went down into the bomb shelters of the city, and they've been staying there ever since. And you can see that a lot of them appear to not be in a great state of mind anymore, because staying in a bunker like this and hardly even seeing any sunlight will, of course, put you, I guess you could say, in a very bad state. We can see that cats are down here with them as well, and we can see that they just have their beds lined up down these hallways and corridors, and they're just trying to live their lives as best as possible. Of course, who really wants to live like this? Of course, this is the only thing they have, as one of the few ways they'll survive, but it's just very sad to see that they have to live like this, and we can see picture after picture, the conditions aren't really great. It's the best they can get. But once again, unfortunate. And it's terrible to think that the Russians are the ones pushing them into these kinds of bunkers. I don't know where this is. It actually looks like the basement, well, the first floor of a hotel or something. But we can see the kids running around, still trying to have a good time and play. Of course, kids don't know any better, so they always just go around and try and have a fun time wherever. And of course, that's a positive attribute of them being kids, is that they're never really affected all too much by, you know, what's going on around them. We can now see another picture of one I'm assuming is a mother and her child, or maybe two mothers. I'm not really sure. This person here looks incredibly young, but we can now see the long corridors where their beds still are. And then lastly, we can see a kid who looks like he's playing on his computer. Maybe he's running Ukraine war streams. I don't know, because that's about what my room looks like. But with that, when you see the conditions aren't that great, and I wish these people the best of luck. It must be terrible to live in conditions like these for almost 4 months, but hopefully it'll end very soon for them, and hopefully they can return to the ground, or they'll hopefully have a house or something similar to go back to, and once again live in like a life would just return to normal. So with that, we're now going to move out of the Kharkiv area. We, of course, have nothing to report in the Chuhuiv area or the Balaklia area, and we're now going to move down into, I guess you could say, the entire northern Donbass area. We have news stretching from one end of Donetsk all the way into Luhansk today. So we're going to start over here at the furthest over to the west, where we've gotten a video of that Aerobatics team MiG-29 that we saw a while ago. Actually, we saw it on film. A lot of people were saying it had been repurposed into Ukrainian service again, and it had the old Aerobatics livery on it. And we can see that they never painted over that livery, and this MiG-29 is flying around the skies of Ukraine with this very colorful and very neat looking aerobatic livery on it. And so here's the video. You see him looking at the rainstorms that are going on around him, which is really cool to see. And you see him pan the camera back over his wing, and you can see the paint scheme of this aerobatic MiG-29. And we know for certain that this MiG-29 this isn't an old video, because aerobatics aircraft never have live missiles equipped onto them. And also it adds weight, which makes them less maneuverable. And so we can see here that they, of course, have those equipped, which does let us know that this was taken today, and this MiG-29 has now been pushed back into service as a combat aircraft. Very cool to see, and it's very neat to think that there was a MiG-29 with such a colorful and pretty looking camouflage, or paint scheme, I guess you could say, flying around the battlefield. So with that, very interesting to see, and we're now going to move on further east towards the area of Sloviansk, where we're going to start moving into this picture that I actually started off the stream with, about Russia going to war on food. It appears that the Russians for quite a while have been trying to steal massive amounts of grain from the captured areas of Ukraine and ship them back to Russia, regardless of whether that food is something that other nations like Saudi Arabia and the African countries, well, really the Middle East and African countries, are relying on to survive. And we know for a while that's been the case, but today we're starting to see that a little bit more, and it's become something that's been moved to the forefront. Here in this picture, we can actually see that a train car filled with food for the World Kitchen, which is one of the nonprofits that is over in Ukraine trying to help feed starving people who, of course, have been displaced from the war and are kind of refugees. We can see that one of the train cars was hit dead on by a Russian attack, and the food has been scattered across the entire rail track and rail yard. Of course, the World Kitchen is not dissuaded. They're going to continue on with their operations regardless. But just look at the total amount of food that's been destroyed, and based off of this attack, and seeing that it hit directly onto the rail cars that were associated with the World Kitchen, one would have to assume that this attack was deliberately targeted against that rail car, and the entire purpose of it was to destroy food stores that were going to be fed to Ukrainians. If that was the case, and that of course is an assumption, that may not be the case, but if that is, it's a heinous thing to think that the Russians are literally using food and starvation as a form of threat against the Ukrainians and everyone in the world that supports them, that if you continue to support them, will make sure that you starve. Of course, also, that's what the first... Oh, sorry. I was trying to get something out of my desk right there real quick, but that's what the first thumbnail was associated with, and it's very sad to see. We'll also be covering that there in the southern front, where we'll see that the Russians are not allowing Ukrainian farmers to sell their produce, but it's, of course, a terrible thing to see. With that, we're now going to move even further east, and we're going to see some Ave Caesar. Just in case if y'all don't know Latin, and that was a very poor pronunciation of Latin, Ave means hello. It's really Ave, because the W in Latin is really pronounced like a V, but it's Ave Caesar. And I said that because it was just a joke, you know? It's like a joke on old Roman history, but we can see here that the Caesar SPGs provided by France are operating still on the front lines, and we got a picture of one in operation today. Hopefully knocking out Russian troops, hopefully causing them a lot of panic, disarray, a lack of supplies and communications. We don't know what this is targeting, but hopefully it's something that will really matter. We're now going to move further west, or further east, towards the area of the Severodonetsk River, where we can actually see the 80th Brigade has once again committed more offensive actions against the Russians, and have managed to destroy, apparently, a T-90, and then another MBT also claimed to be a T-90. So apparently they destroyed 2 T-90s in this clip. We can see the first one exploding there, supposedly from a javelin attack. Toasty. And then we can see the second T-90 here that's already brewing up, now starting to become an inferno as the ammunition is cooking off within the turret. Great to see, and 2 T-90s being knocked out is something. The Russians only have a couple of hundred T-90s, and so destroying 2 or 3 of them is actually a sizable percentage. Like, say they have 350 of them. Knocking out 3 or 4 of the T-90s is knocking out 1% of Russia's operational T-90 force. So when you put it in that perspective, any loss of any kind of these tanks is actually significant. Like, for example, when that T-90M was destroyed, there's only about, I believe, let me think, what's the specific number? About 35 T-90Ms, and we already know that 1 or 2 of them have been destroyed. And so when you put it in that perspective, it is pretty wild, honestly, that the Russians, of course, commit these to the front line in great numbers and just continue to do so. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, and I just want y'all to know, I just saw that donation come in. That's amazing, but we'll of course get to the question segment here soon, and we'll cover that here in a second, so hang tight, man. We will get to that. Moving on down the front towards Severodonetsk, and also to everyone else who may have rejoined, if you did send in a super chat in the last stream, don't worry, Matthew collects every single one of the super chats that's sent in, and we never lose track of them, and so we will answer those questions. Do not fret, we'll answer every single one of them. I'm very sorry once again, just want to say that the stream was interrupted. It's incredibly annoying to me. Sadly, I can't control it. Apparently there's a massive thunderstorm going on outside that I didn't know about, and it's crazy. We actually rely on fair weather here on the Enforcer channel to run these streams. We're almost like a sailboat, you know, like I'm like having to sit there every day and think about, if we have fair weather, we can make it across the Atlantic, you know. It's like, why in the world, you know. Anyways, I'm not going to go through that. It's really stupid that the weather does things like that to my power and my internet. Sometimes just the internet alone. But anyways, we're now going to move into the city of Severodonetsk, which once again has been met today with pitched fighting. The fighting has been incredibly intense for around the past 2 weeks at this point, and we've seen neither side manage to make any ground. We saw the Russians push the Ukrainians nearly out of the city, and then the Ukrainians managed to rally and push the Russians almost out of the city again. We then saw the Russians rally and push the Ukrainians back a little bit, and now we can see that the front line sits somewhere in the middle of the city, although the fog of war doesn't really let us know exactly which streets are under whose control, but we do know that there's kind of like a very gray area of a front line somewhere through the middle of Severodonetsk, and we can see today more video evidence of the heavy firefights that are occurring within the city. And so here's the video of those firefights.
Ось так в Северодонецьку проходить 4 дні. Це Це танковий снаряд, друзі. Дуже близько. Десь приблизно 25 метрів. Нічого собі. Вирішили під вечір ще одну хвилю. Це серйозно.
You just hear these massive firefights unfolding across the city.
Дуже близько. Це по району цієї башти.
And it's insane because with the amount of firefighting that's going on like this all day, it occurs day and night in Severodonetsk at this point. Neither side's making any ground. And we know that the Russians have diverted almost all of their resources and efforts into Severodonetsk, and we know that the Ukrainians have diverted not all, but a decent amount of their resources and efforts into this area. We know that that's not all of it because they're also pushing a counterattack in Kherson right now. And the Russians and the Ukrainians are meeting head to head with deadly fire, and they're still not managing to make any ground over the other. And it's just unbelievable, especially with the amount of fire that's coming from the city. You would think that someone would be falling back, but neither side is. They are dead set on keeping every inch of ground they've currently got.
З баштою він вже вигорів, але артилерія і танки продовжують бити по цій башті.
That's the end of the video, but the firefighting is unbelievable in Severodonetsk, and surprisingly, out of all of that fire that we've been seeing for days at this point, neither side has still managed to push the other out of the city. Hopefully, if one side does get pushed out, the Ukrainians will push the Russians out of Severodonetsk, but we have heard that apparently the Russians may be poised to take the city within the next week. And the Ukrainians may have been trying to hold the city as a stalling action to try and make sure that they would be able to fortify their defenses on the other side of the Severodonetsk River in Lysychansk, or their actual intent was to hold this city and then they will have lost it. Either way, it is it's very interesting to see a battle get this pitched and this fierce. I believe this is actually the most fierce battle that we've seen in the war so far in terms of the infantry on infantry combat that we've heard of. And I just hope that the Ukrainians are able to come out on top. If they don't, they have great defensive positions behind the city, but it would be good to know that the Ukrainians can stand on their own even against the largest Russian assault we've seen in this war in a single concentrated area, and of course keep the Russians at bay. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the northern Donbass area, and we're now going to start moving down towards the southern front and the remainder of the news. But before we do, we're going to take a quick pause to address the questions from the chat that we had in the last stream before it was interrupted, and this one, and boy oh boy, do we have a big one. So with that, Matthew, on to the questions.
All right, so as most of you saw, we had a tremendously large donation just come in a moment ago from the Vladinator. And first off, thank you so much for your generosity. The Vladinator puts in a $350 donation to the channel and says, "Keep up the good work, mate. I'm a lawyer in Australia, so it's nice to know where your plan is. Never forget to stay true to yourself because the profession can be toxic. Nevertheless, I've been watching and enjoying your streams for quite a while, and here is some goodness toward a battery for your router. I'm pretty sure they exist, and all the best."
Well, I thank you so much, Vlad, for that massive amount of support. That's almost like a Mr. Beast kind of level of support. And I can't believe you've enjoyed this channel so much that you're willing to help us go on like that. I got to thank you once again. It helps out this channel unbelievably. And we're so appreciative for that kind of support here because it's the only way we can keep running. You know, like I'm going to, of course, I always like to reiterate this again every once in a while, but we run no ads because I don't like ads. And although we could make money off of them, I find them incredibly annoying. And so I'd rather take the hit ad-wise than subject people to torture, pretty much in my opinion. So I'm so appreciative that people do support me through, of course, super chats like that. That's probably one of the biggest ones we've gotten in a very long while. And it's just wonderful to me to know that people do enjoy our channel so much that they are more than happy to support us and keep this whole entire thing running. And so I got to thank you once again. It means a whole lot to us. And I thank you once again for the words of support about becoming an attorney. Becoming an attorney seems to be a little bit of a rocky road, and law school appears to be pretty expensive, but hopefully it will all pan out for me in the end. I've found college to be pretty engaging, but also pretty pretty good at the same time, been able to keep very good grades. So I hope that I can keep the same through law school. And yeah, I pretty much relegated that wherever I go and whatever I do, there's always going to be some negative elements. There's never anything that's perfect. Like doing YouTube, which is something that a lot of people don't think about. And while while it's something that, you should just ignore, it does get annoying that whenever I try and read through my comments, and I've largely stopped reading through them because it takes up so much time, but whenever I would read through them, I pretty much just end up trying to delete a load of comments that were just negative against me, the channel, or all of the viewers and stuff, because while, and, I'm not going to go down that whole speech about what, like, YouTube bots and trolls are like, because, it's just the thing that everyone has to live with, but there's nothing, there's always a negative to everything, pretty much, is what I'm trying to say. And so, while YouTube seems like it would be a rose garden, hearing negativity in comments from like 40 people at a time, of course, is a little bit downing. I try and not let it bother me too much because most of them are bots or, insane or something like that. But of course, I do already know that the legal profession will probably be pretty sketch. The cops, of course, just looking at cops, whether you like them or hate them, everyone I think can agree that if you're around a cop, you're always scared that they're going to blast you because you don't know what a cop's going to do, especially here in the United States where they're armed. So. That's just looking at police and the enforcement side of the law. I'm assuming that the jurisdiction side of the law, like the actual governance, like the courts, the actual attorneys themselves, there won't be nothing but perfect times as an attorney either. But still, I think it is a good path to go, and eventually I will try to go into politics and hopefully become a very good president in 2040. So make sure to vote for me in 2040 if you want to make sure that I become president. Because what you're hearing right now is probably the exact same things that I would be saying in general about everything as president. So, of course, you can't vote in Australia. I was just thinking about that, Flatinator, but still, it's really cool to get that kind of support. I got to thank you so much once again. And also, a battery for my router, I would like that. But sadly, it's been the general trend that when the power goes out in our area, the Wi-Fi goes out as well. And sometimes the Wi-Fi is completely detached from the power, and our power will stay on, but our Wi-Fi will go out. But of course, thank you so much once again for the support, Vlad. That support's impressive, and it really means a lot to me. You don't know how much it means to me because regardless of whatever's going on this channel or whatever's going on in the world, I can always count on the viewers to appreciate what the amount of work that Matthew and me put into this and help us to keep on doing it. So I thank you once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $50 donation from Momcat Max, who says, "Pizza money, guys, and Slava Ukraine."
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and we will make sure to get a pizza with it. Hopefully you're here from last stream. A lot of people got booted off, and while we have around 2,700 people watching right now, that is only about half, if not a little less than half, of what we had watching before the stream cut off. So hopefully you're here, and hopefully you are hearing this. Because we do appreciate your support, and it's wonderful to get a little bit of pizza money here and there to keep us running and to keep our stomachs full. I actually had some pizza rolls a little while ago, and I haven't had those in ages, and they were so good. Matthew and me have been hitting those things like there's no tomorrow, and we're almost out of the bag. So with that, I thank you once again for the support. I hope that kind of addresses the comment, and we're very appreciative to everyone who helps this channel keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $50 donation from John Boyer, another one of our channel regulars, who says, "Question: do you think that Snake Island and Crimean Bridge could be back in Ukraine's sights as KHERSON looks promising? Bravo new 1 billion U.S. aid. Enforcer and Enforcer Matt are the coolest. Encore President Zelensky and Slava Ukraine."
Well, thank you so much. I love how a lot of people end off their little messages and their super chats with like an address to everyone. Like with you, John, you address President Zelensky, me and Matthew, and also all of Ukraine. And it's always cool because it's wonderful to know that people support us and also Ukraine as well. And it's just it's always great to hear, and it's always wonderful because it's like the super chats help us to keep the stream running monetarily, but of course, just in our mindset, it's always good to hear support from everyone because that also helps us to keep on running in our heads because it makes us feel like we're doing something good and people actually do appreciate it. So I thank you so much once again, John, for the support. And also, I don't know if Snake Island and the Crimean Bridge would be back in Ukraine's sights. Kherson is one of the strategically most important cities in Ukraine. It does control the mouth of the Dnieper River. But at the same time, it's not critically important because, of course, the Russians control the coastline of a large amount of the Dnipro reservoir just south of Zaporizhia. And so it's not really like if the Ukrainians took Kherson, river boats would be able to travel up and down the river again. They may be fired upon by the coastlines, the shoreline on both sides of the reservoir. So in that instance, it is very important, but I don't think that'd be putting Snake Island back on the map because Snake Island is actually closer to Ukraine's western coast here on the southwestern side of the country than it is Kherson. And also the Crimean Bridge is closer to, I guess you could say, Mariupol. At least it looks like that. Let me measure that. Kherson to the Kerch Bridge is 205 miles. And then Kherson to, Mariupol to the Kherson Bridge, the Kerch Bridge, is 136. So it is a little bit closer. But of course, retaking Kherson would be a massive blow to the Russians in this area. They actually don't control any other major cities at the moment, rather than, actually they control, I would say 4. They control Kherson, Melitopol, Berdyansk, and Mariupol. Berdyansk and Severodonetsk are actually equivalent in size, around 110,000 people in each city. Mariupol was a city with a population of around 500,000. After the war, it may be around 400,000 due to how many people died. Melitopol, I believe, is around 100-something thousand as well. And then Kherson, I believe, had around 250,000 people living in it. I could pull that up real quick. Let's get a number on that. Kherson population. They add around 250,000, just a little bit over. It's really closer to 300,000. And we can actually see that their population's been declining throughout the years, which is interesting. I wonder where these people are going. We can see that Kharkiv has also had a massive decline. Wait a minute, let me go look at that because I'm actually... well, apparently not. It made it look like a massive decline. Anyways, to get back onto the question and keep on focus, I don't think that would bring those back into the picture, but it would bring a Ukrainian offensive heading towards Crimea itself back into the picture because they have to create a foothold on the other side of the Dnipro River to ever consider that. And so I hope that does answer the question. And once again, I thank you so much for the support, John, because it's of course wonderful to get support from everyone, and it helps to keep our channel running. And I thank you once again. It means a lot to us, and I'm greatly appreciative to every single one of our viewers that helps this channel out. And with that, we're on to the next. We're we'll be on to one last question since I just said that, but then we'll be rounding out this question segment, covering the rest of the news from around the country and also internationally, and then we'll go to the speech from President Zelensky and answer questions for the rest of the night. And so with that, on to our last question for this segment, and then we're going to move on to the rest of the news.
And the last question of this segment goes to none other than BC Skyman, a channel legend, who puts in a $50 donation and says, "Okay, guys, here's some more spam and corned beef money."
Well, I thank you, BC Skyman, for accommodating both Matthew and me, spam and corned beef. Of course, I think while I am a huge fan of spam and corned beef can coexist peacefully. As George Bush used to say, I think that, what did he say, Matthew? I think man and fish can coexist peacefully. He said something like that. Yeah,
yes, that was it.
It was that. Like beyond the politics, okay? I'm not talking about Bush politically, but Bushisms, if y'all remember those, I think a lot of my viewers are old enough to remember the Bushisms. Some of them aren't. But if you remember the Bushisms, they were hilarious. Bush had a whole bunch of funny things they did. Like the funniest one to me is, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. Look, you fooled me once, you can't fool me again." I mean, that's like, he has a million memorable moments that were just hilarious to me. And I hope a lot of y'all agree because Bushisms were just hilarious. But I do think that spam and corned beef can coexist peacefully. And with that, I thank you so much for the support, BC Skyman. And it's always greatly appreciated. And it's always great to know we have viewers who are around that have supported this channel through and through and enjoy all we do. We are working, and I have Matthew working right now on getting me the video files we made on finally making that Browns Ferry video. We're going to try and get it out sometime in the future. I know that the release date was put on hold indefinitely, but I am going to try and work on that because I would like this channel, considering that this war is going to go on well into the foreseeable future. I would like this channel to finally grow beyond Ukraine, and it's not going to end the Ukraine war news, but it's going to grow beyond Ukraine and start covering even more topics that are outside of its reach. So with that, I thank you once again so much for the support. And that is the end of the question segment for right now. If you have sent in a super chat, do not worry. We do answer all of them by the end of the night. But for now, we're going to move on into the rest of the news from around the country, around the world, and also President Zelensky's speech. And then we'll return to the question segment and answer everyone's super chats. And we'll also answer as many live chat questions as we can. So with that, we're now going to move all the way through the rest of Luhansk and Donetsk. Surprisingly, nothing has happened today. There's been no activity on the Popasna Finger. There's been no activity around Svetlodar. There's been no activity in Donetsk. There's been no activity near the front lines near Volnovakha, all the way down past Zaporizhia. But we do have one interesting and very ominous bit of news that we got today from behind the lines in occupied Ukraine. We've seen that farmers are having to destroy their crops because the Russians are not allowing them to sell them. We know that this food is desperately needed all around the world, and we're about to watch Ukrainians unload loads of cucumbers, cabbages, and all other kinds of vegetables and food that's been grown in that area of the country. And they just have to leave them to rot and to be destroyed because the Russians aren't allowing them to sell it. And we're already talking about around the world that there's a massive impending food shortage that'll be happening in the Middle East and Africa because Ukraine has not been able to provide the food that it normally makes. And the Russians do not care. They are going out of their way to ensure that the Ukrainian farmers cannot provide any sort of food whatsoever. And they're going to try and pretty much starve out the Middle East and Africa and use them as hostages to try and make the West bend and say, okay, Ukraine, maybe you need to give up so that way there will be food to send at all. And so here's the video, and we also have a speech-to-text translation at the bottom.
Дивіться, яка життя у нас тут стала Запорізькою областю. Город Енергодар. Окупирована територія. Дивіться, як хорошо ми вибрасуємо красиві огурці.
This is in Kherson. And right here they're unloading a truckload of cabbages and just throwing them out to rot. And just for y'all to know, I don't know if Middle Eastern and African countries use cabbage a lot in their food, but cabbage is one of the mainstays of Ukrainian and Russian food, as it was very easy to make into different kinds of soup. I believe one of them is, I would have to try and remember the name. I believe one of them is borscht. But it's a very common thing to use in a lot of food in Eastern Europe, and we can see it just being destroyed literally by the truckload, as the Russians are not allowing these farmers to sell this food. And we already know about the food shortage that's coming up because everyone's scared that the Russians are threatening this food supply. And now we can see them directly getting involved in completely stopping and allowing food to rot so that way they can do whatever their objective is here. There's a simple objective here. This isn't some kind of a grand conspiracy theory or anything. This is very straightforward. And the only thing I can think is that they're trying to leverage an oncoming food shortage to try and get some kind of an appeasement agreement going on later on in this war. That's probably what this is being directed towards, and they're literally going to indirectly starve millions of people to try and win this war any way they can. And that just lets you know how sick they are. This is something that's been in the Russian playbook forever, specifically with Ukraine. If y'all may remember, back in Soviet times, there was the literally constructed famine that Stalin had, the Soviet famine in Ukraine. We'll pull that up real quick so that way I can get down here. It's called the Holodomor. Millions of Ukrainians starved to death in Ukraine. We can actually see a picture here of people who have just died and literally starved to death on the side of the streets out of this constructed famine that the Soviets made under the guidance of Joseph Stalin back in the 30s. And the Russians did this whole entire thing because they hated the Ukrainians. And the whole entire thing was constructed to pretty much commit indirect genocide against the Ukrainian people and try and wipe them out and then have this land replaced by Russians. They literally started to cart in ethnic Russians to replace the Ukrainians that had died during the Holodomor. Just for y'all to know, kind of how sick the Russians were at the time. And it does show that, this is... I'm just going to say, this shows that racism does exist within the Soviet countries as well, which is always something that communist countries try and tout, and we're not going into what's real communism and what's not, because, that's a never-ending can of worms. But the Soviets declared they were communist, and you can see that their leadership was racist enough that they were literally trying to kill off an entire race of people, the Ukrainians, to replace them with the Russians. And we can see them kind of doing that again, and we can see that they're not only doing this to the Ukrainians, they're also doing this to the Arabic people, and they're also doing this to the Africans as well. And so and now they're trying to do it on an even larger scale, I guess you could say. And we'll have to see how this turns out. But I do believe this will probably lead to the impending food shortage that we've been hearing about for quite some while. So with that, we're now going to be moving out of that area of the country, and we're now going to be moving further down the front, and we're now going to be moving towards Novokakhovka, where we can actually see that we got enough news to figure out what that fire was yesterday. It's apparently an ammunition fire, and that fire was still burning as of the early hours of the morning today. And so here's the video of that fire still burning a day later at that ammunition storage. And I just saw real quick, I want to credit this because this is true, but I forgot about it and didn't mention it. Jack Ray said that the Russians also starved the Ukrainians in 1946 as well, and that is true. They starved them twice. The larger of the starvations was the Holodomor, but it did happen again in 1946. Moving on real quick into China, they indirectly, like literally just through poor planning, created a mass famine that killed around 40 million people, called the Great Leap Forward. Go pull that up if you're interested. But once again, another dark moment in history in terms of famine, killing off millions. But here's the video of this ammunition fire burning. And apparently whatever kind of ammunition was stored in there just continues to burn non-stop. I don't even know how much ammunition could be in a building for it to burn like this. But it is certainly causing a massive amount of damage to Russian ammunition stores in this area. And so with that is the end of the video. And we can see there that, of course, this ammunition dump is burning for 2 days straight. And so whatever was in there is apparently uncontrollable in terms of the fire that's been caused, and it's just going to continue to burn until it destroys everything in the building, most likely. Which is good for us. Hopefully it continues to burn on. With that, we're now going to move past the Kherson finger, I guess you could call it. We haven't heard of any developments there, but we have heard of developments directly west of the city of Kherson. The Ukrainians apparently have been conducting counterattacks in this area and have managed to push the Russians back to the outskirts of the city. It looks like they covered a few miles today, and while I've never been able to update these front lines, the Russians did actually have a front line that pretty much ran east to west, parallel with what we have right here, and the Ukrainians have managed to push them back to where they're almost in Kherson. Today we did see a video, though, of some of the Marines that were in the brigade that was pushing this offensive getting hit by Russian artillery. Of course, losses will be incurred when counterattacks and offensives do take place, but we do know that in the process of these Ukrainians here getting shelled, wounded, and killed, their compatriots were covering massive amounts of ground and pushing the Russians back nearly to the outskirts of Kherson. With that, we're now going to move into the city itself, where we can actually see the Russian headquarters of the Russian armed forces in the entire area of Kherson being hit in the dead center and most likely causing massive damage to the communication and command structure of the forces in that area of the country. Here we can see the command building that they're using. And we're about to see a bomb land smack dab into the middle of that courtyard and probably blow shrapnel through every single wall in that building. And now you can see the smoke billowing out after that bomb has exploded. And it's a happy day, as a Russian command post being hit like this most likely had high-ranking officers within it. We're not sure yet, but it definitely had a very big part in, I guess you could say, the organization, management, and the conduct of the soldiers on the front. And now that it's been maybe knocked out or heavily damaged, it went into disarray most likely for several hours, if not well into tonight, and it caused many, I guess you could say, communication gaps on the Russian front lines, where forces were not coordinated with each other, and there was a lack of intel and information for them to get as to what they were doing or what's happening around them. So, of course, great to hear, and it looks like the Ukrainians are really pushing the Kherson area, and they're managing to take decent amounts of ground and also destroy critical Russian military infrastructure that will help them to continue to push on these counterattacks. Hopefully, we'll see Kherson within Ukrainian hands soon, but we did see this happen before where the Ukrainians nearly pushed the Russians out of Kherson, and sadly, the offensive stalled. So hopefully this time they can succeed, but of course, only time will tell. We're now going to move out of the front lines in general, and we're now going to move up into the area of Ternopil, where you see a very quick rundown, I would say almost like a tutorial, on how to use an M109 Paladin. I would call this the Ukrainian how-to basic, as the Ukrainian soldiers apparently got some large sheets of paper, taped them to the side of this M109, and then wrote down the basic information about the M109, like what kind of transmission, the amount of whatever should be in it, 34 liters, 72 liters, 15 W-40. I can't see what that says actually. We can see them describing what kind of engine it is, what kind of power it has, you know, the gears, how the instrument panel's set up. So it looks like it's kind of explaining to drivers how this tank will work and what to focus on with the engine and other operating mechanics of the vehicle. And it's wonderful to know that the Ukrainians are still trying to pick up and learn very fast Western systems that are being sent to them, and hopefully they will be able to pick this up very quickly, and of course try and eventually use these on the front line along with all the other M109s that are already there. And it's wonderful to see this, and I hope that the Ukrainians continue on training. While this does look a little jank, it's still better than nothing, and the Ukrainians are quick learners, and so I'm sure this is going to help out some crews in how to operate this vehicle, and hopefully we'll see them on the front very soon. Another thing that I want to note is that these stars here are lined out in the shape of the Little Dipper. And y'all may not be able to see the last two over here where my mouse cursor is, but that is the Little Dipper. And that's something that actually shows up on the flag of Alaska. So we know for sure, and I'll show you all this, there's the Little Dipper on the Alaskan flag, right there. And there's the Little Dipper on this M109 right there. So going off of that, I'm going to assume that this was most likely an M109 that was in the Alaskan National Guard. Perhaps. That may be a stretch, but I feel like something being painted onto an M109 like that would most likely make it in the Alaskan National Guard, perhaps. Let's pull that up, actually. Alaskan M109. We don't get any information on that. We get Huskies, though. Those are pretty, but that's not what we're looking for. But with that, we're now going to move out of the country, and we now have international news to cover. We're now going to move to Belgium, where there was a meeting by the United Nations today, and the NATO countries, at least some of the major ones, agreed that they're going to send a lot, and they're going to send the gamut, I guess you could say, of MLRS systems that will be useful to the Ukrainians. The United States already has said that they're going to send over 12 M142 HIMARS MLRS systems, which have a maximum range of about 50 miles, which will help the Ukrainians a large deal in pushing the Russians back, as its potency is pretty high. There is a very similar system to the M142 called the M270. The difference in between the two is that this one is actually based on a tracked unit, while the M142 is based on a wheeled Oshkosh chassis. But both the launchers are exactly the same on both systems. So pretty much the only difference is in how pretty much in how these things move and what the chassis is. So, we heard some NATO countries come together today, one of these being the United States, and they pledged to send over, and I'll give you all the exact numbers. The United Kingdom is pledging to send 3 M270s, the United States is saying they're going to send 4, and Germany said they're sending 3. So in total, we've got, let me make sure I get the numbers, 10 M270s being sent to Ukraine. That is nearly going to double the amount of, I guess you could say, HIMARS systems that are going to be sent to Ukraine, and that's going to double the firepower that the Ukrainians can deliver to the Russians in terms of these specific MLRSs. Hopefully this is going to help the Ukrainians twice as much in pushing the Russians back, and I do believe, while a small step, it is definitely the step in the right direction to be sending Ukraine much more competent and much more high-tech artillery systems that will be much more efficient in pushing the Russians back out of the country and helping the Ukrainians take the initiative. So with that, we're now going to be moving out of Belgium, and we're now going to move across the pond, I guess you could say, and we're now going to come to the United States. We've heard 2 bits of news today from America. We've heard, of course, that a new $1 billion package is going to be sent to Ukraine. This includes Harpoon missiles and apparently trucks that carry and launch those Harpoons. And we've also heard, let me make sure I get this correct, it was removed by the moderator, but more precision rockets as well. And so, of course, a great package. 1 billion isn't as great as 40 billion, but it's still another billion, and it is still a bit of extra support. So, great job, of course, to the United States, my home country, for sending over a little bit of extra aid. And we can also hear today from the Pentagon here in the United States that they've estimated some 20 to 30% of Russia's armored force in the armed forces has been entirely destroyed by the Ukrainians. I believe this number is a little bit higher, probably around 35 to 40%. But then again, this is literally all guesstimations from everyone's side. There's really no true figure. It's all approximations. So the Pentagon doesn't really know for sure. And when everyone says, everyone's about to say in a second, oh, but they're the military, they will know. Yeah, but they also said that Ukraine was going to fall in 3 to 4 days. The United States military did. So, they can be a little wrong, even with them having $600-700 billion in a budget every single year. But we can hear General Milley here. I believe he's the chief of staff, and he was stating this clearly. And so I'm going to let y'all see the video where he says this himself, and apparently this is the official position of the United States, and the information they've been able to confirm is that the Russians have lost 1 in every 3 tanks that they actually have that are operational. So here's the video.
Military effect, shall we say. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, are using much better artillery techniques, and they're having pretty good effect on the Russians. The Russians have lost probably somewhere in the tune of 20 to 30% of their armored force. That's significant. That's huge. So the Ukrainians are fighting a very effective fight tactically with both fires and maneuver. And that's significantly achieving
And now we can see the video loops, but you could hear him say the critical words. 20 to 30% of the Russian armored forces have been completely lost. With this in mind, the Ukrainians have done more to cripple the Russian army than anyone in the world could have ever hoped to do at any time in history. To imagine at one point, at any other point when the Soviet Union existed, and then from then on, the Russian Federation, no country in the world could have ever dreamed of saying, in a conventional war, we have destroyed 30% of Russia's armored forces. That's something that would have never been uttered in the Cold War, because the bare utterance of such a word like that would mean that nuclear war was soon to be on the horizon. And the Ukrainians, fighting for the defense of their country, a country that was never expected to survive less than a week, has managed to wipe out 30% of Russia's tanks. I believe it's really close to 40% if we were to go off of a more accurate figure. 1,500 is halfway to 3,000. And they've done it. And it's unbelievable to think that they've been able to do this. And when you think about that, in a normal perspective, losing 30% of one's armored forces, and if we were to transcribe that to the Russian military in general, and they've lost 30% of their capability as a ground force, in a normal historical perspective, that is a crushing blow. And it will be a crushing blow for them in the future, as they will definitely not have the ability to threaten the rest of the world, because 1, they now look like a joke, and 2, they won't actually have a third of their abilities to actually carry through on what they're saying. And I think it's incredible news. And of course, it's great to hear that confirmed by the United States, that it's at least 20 to 30%, because that means that the Russians are a third weaker. And so with that, we have now covered all of the international news, and we're now going to circle all the way back to Kyiv to listen to the speech from President Zelensky, and then we'll, of course, go back to the question segment and answer everyone's questions from the live chat, and also answer, we're going to answer everyone's super chats, and then we're going to answer as many questions from the live chat as possible. And so, here it is, the address from President Zelensky, here on day 112. So here's the video.
Бажаю здоров'я. Завершився довгий і дуже насичений день. Від самого ранку пріоритет зовнішньої політиці. Причому одразу на 2 життєво важливих напрямках – оборона і Європа. Щойно завершив розмову з Борисом Джонсоном. Ключові теми – оборонна підтримка і координація кроків напередодні важливих зустрічей у червні. Сьогодні багато новин про 3-ю зустріч в форматі Рамштайну. Це формат для роботи міністрів оборони країн-партнерів, які визначаються з пакетами підтримки для нашої держави. І новини дійсно хороші, очікуємо збільшення цієї підтримки. Маємо, до речі, черговий сигнал, що оборонна підтримка України буде сталою. В рамках Рамштайну Британія і Данія оголосили про проведення у серпні спеціальної донорської конференції в Копенгагені. Попередньо залучені 14 держав. Провів сьогодні важливу розмову з президентом Америки Байденом. Сполучені Штати оголосили про нове посилення нашого захисту, новий пакет підтримки на $1 мільярд. Це береговий захист, це артилерія, сучасні ракетні системи. Будемо чекати. Вдячні за цю підтримку. Вона особливо вагома передусім для нашої оборони на Донбасі. Вдячні і за лідерство в мобілізації допомоги усіх партнерів. Є й новий пакет гуманітарної підтримки для України на $250 мільярда США. Обговорили з президентом Байденом також і тактичну ситуацію на полі бою, і те, як прискорити нашу перемогу. Санкції, політика, економічна взаємодія. Готуємось до нових кроків. Запрошений до виступів на саміті НАТО в Мадриді, а також на зустрічі Групи Семи. Вдень був спеціальний саміт з лідерами Західних Балкан. В Київ приїжджали прем'єр-міністри Чорногорії і Албанії, а по відеозв'язку був прем'єр Північної Македонії. Україна отримала вагоме рішення про підтримку і цими державами статусу кандидата у члени Євросоюзу. Для нас 3 держави ухвалили таку спільну заяву. Фактично, на сьогодні ми вже настільки наблизились до отримання цього статусу, як не можна було і мріяти ще навіть декілька років тому. Україна зробила усе, що тільки можна було, щоб отримати кандидатство. І сьогодні у зверненні до парламенту Чехії я підкреслив, що відповідь нам по кандидатству – це буде відповідь Євросоюзу не тільки Україні, але й самому собі, своєму майбутньому Європейського Союзу. Звичайно, російська держава не була би собою, якби просто спокійно спостерігала за нашими зовнішньополітичними успіхами. Знову посилюють газовий тиск на Європу, знову посилюють обстріли українських позицій і мирних міст. Сьогодні били по Миколаєву. Сьогодні били по громадам Дніпропетровської області. Сьогодні били на Харківщині. Російські пропагандисти стали активніше вкидати фейки, щоб спровокувати зневіру в Україні. Але не вірю, що хоча б якийсь із цих фейків здатен спрацювати. Оборону на Донбасі ми тримаємо. І, до речі, в усіх міжнародних контактах я чую захоплення діями наших захисників і наших захисниць. Світ справді хоче вчитися в українців тому, як воювати і як перемагати. За 112 днів цієї війни українська армія довела, що хоробрість і мудрість на полі бою разом з умінням тактично переграти ворога дають значний результат навіть попри суттєву перевагу російської армії у кількості солдатів і техніки. Звичайно, ми зробимо все, щоб перекрити ці їхні поки що переваги. Кожного дня я борюся за отримання Україною потрібної зброї і потрібної техніки. Але хоробрість, мудрість і тактичне вміння неможливо імпортувати. Вони є у наших героїв. Підписав чергові укази про нагородження українських воїнів. 284 військовослужбовця відзначені державними нагородами, з них 60 посмертно. Вічна пам'ять усім, хто загинув за Україну. Вічна слава кожному і кожній, хто захищає нашу державу. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Zelensky. And that, of course, rounds out our Day 112 news. I once again want to apologize to everyone who is watching right now for the interruption in our first stream. Of course, sadly, I cannot control it. But I am always very sad whenever that happens because I know that a lot of people won't be able to get back on. They may not be notified that another stream is running, or they may just call it quits for the night and then they may not get all of the news. So once again, sorry to everyone, but I hope you all have enjoyed tonight's news nonetheless. And if y'all have and you are a new viewer, please make sure to subscribe. These streams do run nightly at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and regardless of rain, snow, hail, or sleet, regardless whether the internet goes out, the power goes out, we always try and make sure that all of the news will be covered, and we never leave anyone hanging dry with this stuff. And so with that, I thank everyone who was just here for the news alone for watching, and we're now going to move on into our question segment where we're going to answer everyone's super chats, and we're also going to answer as many live chats as we can. And so with that, what is our first question, Matthew?
All right, and first up, we have a $50 donation from Kaltenberg again. So thank you for your continued support, Kaltenberg, and he does not leave a comment. So I'm sure the enforcer would like to say something about that, so take it away.
Yes, I would. Thank you so much once again, Kaltenberg. You have been here for an incredibly long time and have always been supporting this channel, and it always means a lot to us. And you know, like I sit here and I look back a lot on this channel and how long it's been here at this point, and how many times we've had new people come in, and some of them leave and some of them stay, but a lot of them stay. And you're one of those people. And I remembered you from the very first time that you were in this chat before you even super chat. And I remember you would just chat around a little bit because I try and keep I try and keep everyone's names in mind. I can't ever name anyone off exactly, but if I'm looking at the live chat, I can point out people I know have been here for a while. Like King Mac. I've seen King Mac a couple of times, and I've also seen Packetang a lot. I mean, like, Packetang's been around for a while too, and I'm just looking through the live chat and looking at a lot of the names I see chatting regularly. And it's always wonderful to know that folks like y'all are in here watching these streams, of course helping out those Sunday fundraisers, because I hear y'all's names being mentioned every single Sunday and are always enjoying this channel. And I've got to thank you all so much once again, because it means a lot to me. It means a lot to Matthew, and it's good to know that we always have supporters who believe in this channel a lot and what we do and what we stand for. And so I thank you once again, Kaltenberg, for the support, because that just lets us know that we are doing the right thing and that people do want us to keep on doing it. And so I thank you once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from David Bryan, who says, "How long will Western support last? And what's your take on Western will to support Ukraine?"
The Western will, that's a very hard thing to weigh, you see, because it really all relies on political sway. If it's to go out of political favor and it's not to be in vogue anymore to support Ukraine, support will drop off and just end. So it's a very hard thing to weigh, because I'm not really a good person to talk about public opinion, because public opinion changes so quickly and it's based on nearly nothing. So I don't know. I feel like support for Ukraine would last, even if support publicly was to just fade away, because this is very important to the geopolitical position for the West and also the East. And so it's very much within the US's interests and most Western countries' interests to keep on trying to support this war and support Ukraine and make sure that they do not lose. This is going to put them in a very precarious position otherwise if Ukraine was to lose. So I would suspect that at least for the next 5 months, support will still be dead set, and we'll still see a large amount of, well, a decent amount of aid being sent over. But beyond that, I couldn't really tell you. It may go one way or the other. Something may happen that makes the whole entire world rally around Ukraine, and we might see American soldiers stepping into the Ukrainian borders, or we could see that we just forget about it altogether and the war drags on for months or years. So with that, I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're on to the next one, but I thank you so much once again for the support.
And next up, I want to recognize a donation without a comment. We have it from Jose Diaz, who puts in a $20 donation. So thank you very much, Jose, for the support of the channel. And as always, it is very much appreciated. So, moving on, we now have a $20 super chat from Bobo Uzala, who says, "Are you required to have a badass beard to be Ukrainian top brass?"
I think you pretty much have to have one at this point. I haven't seen a lot of people without a beard or a mustache of some sort, and that's actually something that I think is really neat. Is we keep on seeing, like, within, I guess you could say, social trends, facial hair dying off and coming back at certain times, and I feel like right now we're kind of on the cusp of facial hair kind of coming back. We saw that clean shaven faces were kind of common after World War I, and then continued on into the early 2000s, and now we're starting to see that mustaches and beards are starting to make a resurgence, and it's been like that all throughout history. Like during Roman times, it wasn't really considered great to have a beard, or any kind of facial hair for that matter, and so it was important to keep clean shaven. Then afterwards, in the Middle Ages, you saw that beards came back and mustaches as well, and that existed well into the Renaissance. And, well, really, I guess you could say, to the very beginning of the Age of Enlightenment. Then the Enlightenment came around, and then facial hair wasn't in vogue anymore. Then the romanticism came around, and then facial hair came back in. That was really a Victorian era thing. Then facial hair died, and I kind of went through the more modern aspect of it. But it is really interesting for me to see that facial hair is starting to make a comeback to the point that military regulations, dress regulations around the world, are starting to allow beards and mustaches again. I honestly think that the twirled mustache is actually a pretty decent look historically, but it's really hard to pull one off. You can kind of look a little weird if you do it wrong, but you can look really good if you do it right. I have actually been growing out my goatee and my mustache on my goatee to be able to curl it up for an event I'm about to go do soon. I'm actually going to be a German Jaeger, and so I actually want to look the part a little bit, and so I've been growing out my mustache so that way I can curl it up and make it look a little bit more German, although I can't speak German worth a flip. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. And to answer the question about the Ukrainians in general, I do think they need pretty good facial hair to be in that position. And so I hope that answers the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $20 donation from Captain Chris 1220, who says, "Love you guys and keep up the amazing work."
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and thank you so much for thinking that our work is amazing. We try our best, and it's always great to hear that people do think it's amazing. And so, thank you. I just thank you for the great, kind words and also the support to help us to keep on doing what you believe is great and amazing. And so, I thank you once again. It means a whole lot to us. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Koala Resistance, who says, "Today, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and Army General Mark Milley held a press briefing, and the EU press grilled them on the military aid if it was, quote unquote, too little, too late. If you could attend, what would you ask them?"
I I honestly think that's not really deserving credit from European press because they don't really have a leg to stand on. In terms of the support we've sent to Ukraine versus what the entirety of Europe has sent, we outpace all of Europe by billions of dollars, really tens of billions of dollars, while they've sent diddly squat. And so I don't know why EU reporters, well, not really European Union, I would call them just European reporters in general, would grill Milley and American representatives of the American government because in us, in comparison to the rest of Europe, they've done nothing compared to what we've been doing. Honestly, those European reporters should have been asking them, what kind of examples can we take from the United States, and what can we do in terms of what Germany's sending, or what France is sending, or what even Britain's sending? Because while Britain send the most out of all of them, at least on paper, they haven't actually sent anything sizable, and we can even see that the stuff they're sending over is incomplete. We've seen the Ukrainians having to make makeshift brimstone missile launchers out of delivery trucks because the British didn't send over a way to actually launch them. So in that perspective, I would have asked Milley and them, how are y'all getting so much support to Ukraine, and how can European countries follow in y'all's example? Because while in the world picture, I don't think there's enough support being sent, you still have to compare them all against each other right now and who's sending the most. And European reporters asking the United States that question seems nearly hypocritical when their own countries are hardly sending over anything. So with that, I hope that answers the question, because honestly, I think those European reporters need to get a little bit more information on, at least monetarily, how much aid's been sent over, because then they would understand that they're grilling the wrong people. They should be grilling their own representatives and political figures about why they're not sending over enough support. Because we've seen, I mean, like, just as an example alone, the Germans on paper have sent the entire world. They've sent Gepards, Leopard 2s, Tornadoes. I mean, like, anything you can imagine, they've sent it. But none of it ever arrives. It's all on paper. We've never even heard of the Panzerhaubitzes, which have pretty much been in the making for 2 months, being sent over to Ukraine yet. I mean, it's silly at this point. They honestly should be asking them why has none of this made it to Ukraine, while the United States is still sending over M777s, another $1 billion in aid, Harpoon anti-ship missiles, and also an ability to launch them, and also more guided munitions. I mean, like, it just seems hypocritical. But with that, I hope that answers the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $25 donation from Smog, who says, "We need to start a UPS interruptible power supply fund for the Enforcer, and I'm going to kick it off."
Well, I thank you for the support, and I can agree, because, of course, it's greatly appreciated, and, well, Sadly, I don't think anything's going to fix the problem. It's greatly appreciated, and I can agree that the internet does need to be better. But at the same time, I just don't think there's a change to this, because when the internet, sometimes the internet goes out without the power going down, and so it's just going to be pretty tough to do. Also, real quick, I don't know why people are saying I hate Britain. Like, Britain's my second favorite country in the world behind the United States. So don't know where y'all are going with that, but still. And another thing, just to address the other question real quick, I've seen someone in the chat say the British were the first to give support. While they've been the first, that doesn't mean anything. If like I'm the first person to run a sprint, and then everyone else who runs the sprint afterwards is faster than me, it doesn't mean much, if anything, that I was the first to do it. I hope that kind of answers the question. And a lot of people have been saying they've sent a lot of support. Tell me where it is, because I haven't seen it. Everything we see in Ukraine is almost entirely American made. Almost everything. I've hardly seen anything that's come from another country. We've seen some Norwegian M109s. We've seen some Estonian, Canadian M777s, which coming from those countries is huge. I can't rat on those countries because they're giving their hearts out to Ukraine. The Slovakians have given out their hearts to Ukraine. The Polish have. Everyone has, except for some of the larger Western European countries, because when you look at what they're sending versus their economic capabilities and also the sizes of their militaries, they should be able to send more. And I understand where everyone's coming from, but these are, of course, my opinions on what should be sent over. And everyone always wants to ask the United States, why aren't they doing more in terms of sending aid when they're sending more than everyone else combined by nearly double at this point. So with that, we're on to the next question. I wanted to touch on that one more time because everyone acts like it's okay to trash on the United States and what they're doing, although it can be leaps and bounds above what every other country is doing right now. And then whenever that's turned on another country, say, well, what are they doing? Then everyone from that country wants to take offense to it. I believe the United States isn't sending enough. It should send more. But in comparison to every other country in the world, they're sending gobs of stuff. So with that, I hope that kind of addresses where I'm coming from, and we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and up next we have a $20 donation from Thomas Clark, who says, stock up on the torches, flasks of oil, and some iron rations with your new D&D set. Yes, to fight the orcs.
Well, thank you very much for the support. I've never played D&D. I've heard a lot about D&D. It's a thing that circles the internet a lot, but I've never really played it. I think the closest I've ever got to playing D&D, I don't even think I've gotten close to playing that. I know what it is. I've heard a lot about it, but I've never really played it. But I thank you for the support, and I might look into getting D&D, but I would have to have a group of friends to play it with, and all my friends are reenactors, so we play by shooting at each other in a field. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and I thank you so much for the support once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Jason P. Huckhill, who says, I've been a viewer since day 7 and Slava Ukraine from your friend in Oklahoma.
Well, I thank you so much for the support. Really cool to hear you from Oklahoma. We almost drove through that state, but didn't. I would like to see Oklahoma and Texas one day. I kind of consider them very similar, at least in geography, and kind of like their environment. I guess you could say the ecosystem. Well, whatever. Anyways, I would like to go to Oklahoma someday. But of course, it's great to hear that we do have supporters all around the world and from all over in the United States as well. And so I thank you once again for the support. It's always great to hear that people do enjoy this channel and wants to keep going. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And moving on, we now have a $20 donation from Krister Peterson, who says, Slava Ukraine.
And Slava Ukraine to you as well. And of course, I thank you so much for the support. It means a lot to every little bit means a lot to us. Anyone who wants to support this channel and help us keep running, we're always greatly appreciative to everyone who does that. And so thank you once again. And I hope that does address the comment. And with that, Slava Ukraini. And we're on to the next question.
And moving on, we now have a $20 donation from William Allen, longtime channel viewer and supporter, who says, history proves that the U.S. isolation position has drawn us into large European wars. This war must be won with largely U.S. support in order not to be involved in another useless European war.
That's very true, and I think that's what kind of led to our interventionist policies throughout most of the Cold War, and that's why we got involved in countries like Korea, Vietnam, and then some proxy wars as well, and we did a lot of arms supplying and arms dealing during the Cold War. And it was understandable, really. A lot of people kind of rat on it, but when you look at the situation in the times and what people were looking at then, it was understandable. That's why the Mujahideen turned into the Taliban, and that's kind of why we have that problem now, is because we were trying to stop the Soviets there. But it was understandable at the time, and so I kind of got where they were coming from, although it didn't turn out well in the long run. So I can agree that isolationists, we're not really isolationist anymore. Even from the outset, we've been sending massive amounts of support compared to every other country in the world. We're not necessarily isolationist, but at the same time, we aren't really getting as involved as we should be, at least in terms of the support side. And I do believe that the United States could send a lot more. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next. Excuse me, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Uncle Tababite, who says, I appreciate your daily updates. I hope they get guns, lots of guns, Matrix.
Well, I thank you for the support, and I do agree. I hope that they do get a lot of guns, hopefully good ones. I don't believe. I mean, that's a really tough assessment to make. I honestly think the M16 and the AK are the same. And before everyone goes, oh, no, they're not the same. I know they're not mechanically the same. They operate off of slightly different principles. But I've shot both of them in real life. I've shot both the M4 and the AK-74. And I can tell you, shooting them, you can't really tell a difference. The recoil's nearly the same. You aim them the same way. They're rifles, so of course you aim them the same way. And I didn't really notice the difference in between them much, rather than probably the mechanical simplicity of an AK versus an M4. But even at that I mean, now I'm splitting hairs, but the mechanical simplicity of an AK-47 versus an M4, I would say, is negligible. They really have the same amount of moving parts in them when you actually break them down to clean them. The only difference is that the AK-47 can be disassembled a lot quicker and easier than an M4. I would say that's the only difference in between the two. So hopefully they can just get some kind of a competent, well-made gun, even if it is an AK, and hopefully they can get those at an increasingly larger pace as the future goes on. But I think heavy artillery is, of course, more important than the firearms at this point, because artillery is the winning factor of this war, and with artillery, the Ukrainians can push the Russians back. And so with that, I hope that answers the question or addresses the comment, and I thank you very much for the support once again. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have an $18 donation from Blackhawk NZ, who does not leave a comment. So as always, we love to have questions, but since we don't, we appreciate your support very much. And moving on to our next one, we have a $10 donation from Smarzig, who says, normally I fall asleep listening to you, so naturally Monday nights I'm up all night. P.S. Here are some money for beer or coffee.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and I know that a lot of people just hate Mondays because I'm not on, but I hope that everyone does understand that Monday off is a massive reprieve to me, because for that day, every day of the I sit here almost 60 hours, well, really it's 50 something, 56, 57 or something like that. I sit here for nearly 60 hours a week, 6 days a week, looking at this war, and I see a lot of things I don't put up on stream. I see people getting blown to pieces. I see dogs eating people's guts out. I see kids being killed and just laying on the road. I see all kinds of terrible things, and it gets tiresome. It does wear me out just to do that. And also spending this much time running streams, almost 60 hours a week, is a very tiresome thing as well. And so those Mondays off are a massive reprieve to me, because on that day, I can pretend like everything's fine. I can pretend like the war doesn't exist and people aren't over there getting gruesomely murdered and killed in unbelievable ways. And I can sit here and just enjoy a little bit of a reprieve, and then I get right back to it and make sure to keep on reporting on this war. And so just know that by you losing a little bit of sleep on Mondays, I get a whole lot of sleep that I don't usually get. And I thank you so much for the support. And I hope you do understand that the Mondays off are wonderful for me, and they give me a great break to keep on going. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question. And of course, I'm actually thinking about Mondays, just so that way there is something going out. When we start branching out from the Ukraine war, Mondays are going to be the day that the videos that are not focusing on the Ukraine war might be uploaded on, since there's nothing being sent out that day. So with that, I hope that does address the comment in a way, and I thank you so much for the support and being a wonderful viewer. It's wonderful to hear. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Gary Robbins, who says, so my question is if it would be possible for you to post earlier than 10 p.m. EDT.
It's not really possible, because one, I have to make sure my dogs go to bed. The dogs can be incredibly loud, and I always put them to bed at 9, and that's kind of why this thing starts off how it starts off. Well, 10 p.m. Eastern time is what we go off of, but on my time it's 9 p.m. And so I put them to bed. Well, we all put them to bed around 9. I have to put together the stream, which takes multiple hours, and I actually start off making the summary at 4:30 p.m. my time, and I work from then till the rest of the night. And so if I was to push this back, like say an hour, I start working at 3:30, and if I was to push this back 2 hours, I start working at 2:30, and so then I can't even eat supper. Because I won't have the time to do that because I eat it around like 4 o'clock, which is early, sure, but it's still supper, so I get to eat it and all. But if I push the times back too much, it's going to throw off my normal like daily schedule way too much, and then I won't really have time to tend to things like college and errands and stuff like that. So unfortunately, I cannot push the streams back, and on top of that, we did try that before, and a lot less people showed up for that stream than normal. And so we are unfortunately going to have to keep it at the 10 p.m. Eastern time run date. Well, run time. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you very much for the support. And I hate that it is a little bit late for you, since if it wasn't, you wouldn't be asking that question. But please do understand, it's the best schedule I could make for myself to be able to keep these things running at a continuous schedule. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And once again, I thank you so much for the support.
And moving on to our next question, we have a $10 donation from Judo 2001, who says, I can't remember when I found you, but you are now part of my daily routine. I've been around long enough to know Mr. Lunchtime likes his Leaf Springs nipple flavored. Good work, and Slava Ukraine.
Well, thank you very much for the support. And of course, it does mean a lot to this channel, and you've definitely been around a long time to know about the Leaf Springs and Mr. Lunchtime. And so with that, I thank you once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Applied Cryogenics, who says, thanks for what you guys do.
Well, I thank you so much for enjoying these streams and also helping us to keep on doing what we do. Without our viewers, we couldn't do it. And so, as they say on Homelander, well, not Homelander, The Voice, you guys are the real heroes. And I mean that seriously. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Gregory Smith, who says, thanks for what you do, and I wish I could give more.
Well, it's all right if you can't give more. We don't want people to go into bankruptcy or anything supporting the channel. But of course, I thank you so much for at least saying that, because it lets us know how much you value what we do. And of course, we're always greatly appreciative that people always want us to keep on doing this. Of course, support verbally is great. But to actually keep everything running and pay our bills and make sure that we can survive and pay for college and all that kind of stuff, we always have to make sure that we can, sustain ourselves. And all of y'all, by giving y'all support, make sure that we can focus on this as our full-time jobs. And of course, I thank you so much. Any amount of support helps us, and I'm more than appreciative for what you've sent in tonight. And so I thank you once again so much. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from William Allen again, who says, I appreciate the Mondays off, so does me back pocket. Or so does my back pocket. Whoop.
You turn into Mr. Krabs.
Yes.
Thank you for taking the Mondays off, and so does me back pocket. But I thank you so much. I thank you once again so much for the support. Of course, we always appreciate the support, and it is a funny joke, but if this is ever straining you too much to support the channel, just know it's okay. We do rely on everyone's support, but it's fine if you can't. I'm just happy that people are able to get news that they rely and appreciate every night. That's good enough to me. That's also why we won't go down that road, but I thank you so much once again for the support, and I thank you for understanding why I do take Mondays off, and I hope that a lot of y'all find ways to, of course, keep yourselves going and keep yourselves happy as well, even though these wars are a pretty tough thing. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question, but I thank you so much for the support once again.
And next up, we have an $8 donation from Martin Van Own, who says, thank you much.
Well, I thank you very much. And of course, I thank you for your support. I would like to actually address something that I just saw in the live chat just a second ago from Pat the Horse, and I'm going to address this one, and we're just gonna put this out there. He just said UK sent 3.5 billion in humanitarian aid alone, let alone the military packages. Was that said goodbye? And since you're on your way out, I'm just going to say this. Put that figure side by side with a $40 billion package, paired with about the $12 billion extra dollars that we've sent over in other aid packages, and that starts to look incredibly small. And so if that's the line you draw where you have to leave, then have fun. I mean, like, I'm gonna say this. I'm not gonna pretend to say things because they may hurt people's feelings. Britain has done a lot, but in the context of what the United States has done, it's nothing. So, with that, hope that answers your question, or at least your statement, and we're going to move on to the next one.
And I know a lot of you are noticing that the bots are getting absolutely out of control in the chat. And it seems like right after Zelensky's speech, they really got out of hand. I'm like taking them out left and right. But please bear with us. And if you see one that I missed, as always, tag me and I will get rid of it as quick as I can. So up next, we have a $7 super chat from Olivia McCarthy, who says, do you think if Russia managed to take Donbass, then would Russia's goals change and go on, or will they want to just negotiate and take what they have and quit while they're ahead?
I think that the Russians would generally quit the war if they were able to take the Donbass. The Ukrainians may never negotiate some kind of a peace agreement if that was to occur, but then we would just see what had happened in 2014 happen on a larger scale with the Russian military protecting the DPR and LPR, and we'll also just see the front lines move to the actual borders of Donetsk and Luhansk, and maybe some parts of the Kharkiv Oblast, like Izium, for example, and maybe the southern front, but that's kind of a little bit of a questionable thing. The Ukrainians might be able to push them out of that area, but still, that's a question in its own right. We don't know if they have the ability. So I think, by and large, I think they would actually end the war if they were able to take the Donbass. They wouldn't continue to push on because they're taking heavy losses, and they have been trying to renegotiate their war goals with themselves to try and make them smaller and more attainable. But we can even see with the smaller and more attainable war goals, they just still aren't able to muster the ability to actually, win their objectives. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Sparta 300, who says multiple sources saying that Russian Defense Department are planning to mobilize more forces beginning in July to speed Ukraine military campaign.
Could you reread that one real quick?
Sparta says multiple sources are saying that Russian Defense Department are planning to mobilize more forces beginning in July to speed Ukraine military campaign.
I don't really know if that's true necessarily, because we did hear that same thing in April, and we heard the April draft is coming, and once that comes, there will be hundreds of thousands of new soldiers that will be put into Ukraine to fight. And then the April draft came around, and we're now into mid-June, and it never happened. So I don't think they'll be dedicating any more forces, at least in size, in this front. They pretty much have this front at maximum capacity right now for what you can actually put in there without overcrowding it. And so I don't think they'll be able to add any more, but they may start trying to filter out some of their older, exhausted units with fresher units, perhaps. So with that, I hope that does answer the question in a way. And once again, that is my opinion, so just take it with a grain of salt, because I could be wrong. They may dedicate more forces to Ukraine. They may even reopen a front, but I don't think that's possible in my opinion. But then again, it is just my opinion. And with that, thank you so much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from C.A. Lags, who says, Grandma, what was Russia? It's the desert to our east and northeast, dear.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I thank you very much for the joke. I don't know if you're talking about nuclear desolation, but it is pretty funny how Matthew said that, because the punchline was delivered so, just so flatly. It was like, what? It's like, it caught me by surprise. But I thank you so much for the support once again, and it does help out this channel a lot, and also a pretty good joke. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Koala Resistance, who says Turkey's leader says he's planning a major military operation to push back Syrian Kurdish, threatening to upset Turkey's ties with both the United States and Russia, And what are your thoughts?
Oh man, that's a tough one to get into because you see, Syria's kind of turned into the mosh pit, and like every country in the world that has a score to settle supports some group in Syria. There's the Assad regime. There's the Syrian Democratic Forces. The Turks actually control parts of the northern part of the country. There's some other smaller groups that are kind of sandwiched in between the Assad regime and the SDF. It's absolute chaos in there. I don't even know how to describe it. But the Turks are trying to attack the Kurds, and the Iraqis are trying to attack the Kurds, and the Iranians are trying to attack the Kurds, and everyone's trying to attack the Kurds. Everyone, I mean, like, it goes without saying, and I think this is a truth that goes all around the world. Not a lot of people, I think, harp on this a lot, but everyone in the world hates everyone else. And the Kurds in the Middle East are the ones who are getting the short end of the stick, and we've seen that the United States is trying to support the Kurds. And we can see that there's kind of been a mistake there, at least with how the borders have been drawn up over history, is that the Kurds have somehow always gotten partitioned into multiple different countries that hate their guts. The Iraqis hate them, the Syrians hate them, the Turks hate them, the Iranians hate them, and the Kurds are pretty much left there to fend for themselves. And so that's what the Turks are in Syria for, is that they're trying to, pretty much wipe out the Kurds like everyone else is. So in that regard, they're also, well, in that regard, the reason why he said it's going against Russia is that in the process of the Turks trying to take out the Kurds, they're also trying to fight the Assad regime, which is aligned with the Russians, to further that goal. And they're also attacking the SDF as well to further that goal. This is where the mosh pit part comes in. And so in that aspect, if they continue on these offensives, they're not going to ever be kicked out of NATO. That's impossible. Apparently, they have to request to leave, and then they have to notify the United States that they're wanting to leave, and then they leave. They're never going to be kicked out of NATO, but they will, of course, not be number one in the favor list with pretty much all of the other countries within the NATO alliance. So I hope that answers the question. And of course, that goes into a whole other thing about Kurdistan, because everyone's always talking about the Kurds should have their own country. But I'm going to leave that up to y'all to talk about, because that does become a little bit of a political issue here in the United States by a small margin. But don't really want to go into politics here on this channel. But with that, I hope that does answer the question in a way. I'm not really too appraised of the situation in Syria and also with the Kurds, but that's my general understanding with it. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you once again so much for the support.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Eduardo Gonzalez, who says, as a dude who served in OIF 2 for an Afghan in 09, I see no way that U.S. forces will not be introduced into Ukraine. We will shock the Russians initially, but then where does it go? We will definitely kick ass, but then what?
Well, if you're talking about pushing on into Russia, I'm not sure if that we're for the sake of discussion, we're going to remove nuclear weapons from the equation. In a conventional war, the United States would flatten the Russians within months, most likely. It wouldn't be a month. I'm not saying this isn't the invasion of Iraq. Russia's a much larger country, and of course they have a lot of ground to fall back on until they reach the Urals, which is really the extent of their actual population. The majority of them live on the western side of the Urals, and so it would probably take us a few months, maybe a year, I would say, to take the entirety of Russia. Because while I don't want to sound too optimistic, because while the United States is a powerhouse, things can always go wrong, and then offensives can be stalled. So maybe a couple of months to a year, but once we take it over, we're most likely going to install a government, or at least allow the Russian public to have a fair election where they can actually elect their leaders. And then once we do that, we'll leave. We may try and do something similar to what we did in Germany, not with the occupation zones after World War II, but maybe try and, I guess you could say, de-Putinify, or de-Rashify, if you would like to call it that, the country, and then leave it to its own devices again, kind of like we did with Iraq, because now we can see that Iraq, although the United States pretty much invaded the country, overthrew the government, and then kind of installed one that was suitable to their interests, the Iraqis somehow wound up still not having a liking for us and booting American forces from the country about a couple of years ago. I believe that was when that Iranian general was killed at the Baghdad International Airport. So with that in mind, I think we do about the same thing with Russia, and then we leave them to their own devices. We may also use that opportunity if nuclear weapons were not used to disarm the Russians nearly entirely of their nuclear arsenal, and then just leave them with a small, I guess you could say, garrison of nuclear weapons. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. And yes, I do believe the United States would, in your words, kick ass. It's something that the United States is a master at doing these days. And with a burgeoning budget of around $700 billion, it is the only thing that the U.S. could possibly do with a budget like that. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question. But I thank you once again for the support. And I hope that does address it at least in a way.
All right, and next up we have a $5 donation from Comrade Kulopov Kapitolowski, who says Putin's favorite and most frequently visited mistress is Jabba the Hutt's mom. Slava Ukraine and Heroem Slava.
Golly, that's barbaric. But I thank you for the support, and also that's a pretty bad roast. So I appreciate the roast you gave to Putin, and I also appreciate the support, and also Slava Ukraini, Heroem Slava. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And it is now time to recognize a couple of donations here without comments. We have a $5 donation from NZ Guy. We have a $2 donation from Junebug and another $2 donation from NZ Guy again. So thank you very much to all three of you, or actually two of you, for your support.
There are multiple.
I can't count. Yes. But thank you very much for your support to the channel. And moving on to our next super chat, we have a $5 super chat from Kevin Scott 76, who says, if a smaller country like Israel sent over their jets and pilots, weapons, and troops kicking ass, what could Russia do about it?
Oh, that's a tough question, because obviously they wouldn't nuke the Israelis. I mean, like, maybe they would. I don't know. But I mean, like, if you nuke the Israelis, they're so small that the nuclear fallout would reach another country. Most of it would fall within another country. So I don't know. I mean, like, yeah. I mean, like, that's a tough question. They couldn't nuke them. Obviously, they couldn't send forces into Israel because Israel has a pretty competent military, and also their entire population can be called up for military service. It's one of the few countries in the world that requires both men and women to serve in the military for an extended period of time. And so in that regard, I don't really know if there was a lot they could do to Israel. But then again, the United States could say, hey, you're pissing them off and you're about to cause us a lot of problems. We're about to have to get involved. Don't do this. They did that during the Suez Crisis in 1956 when the Israelis, the British, and the French sought to regain control of the Suez Canal, which was pretty much annexed by, what was the name of that guy? Oh, I can't remember the name of him. But he was an Egyptian Israel, like Nasser or something like that, I believe his name was. But they tried to regain the Suez Canal, and the United States stepped in with no stake in the matter whatsoever and said, hey, what y'all doing is jacked up. It's pissing us off. Stop that. And they made them stop it, give the Egyptians back the Suez Canal, and also all of the Sinai Peninsula that the Israelis had captured as well. So the United States might do something like that to Israel in this occasion, saying, hey, you're going to make this political situation a lot worse for us. Stop that, or else we're going to stop supporting y'all. And so with that, I hope that does address the question in a way, and I do thank you very much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Diffuse56, who says, thanks to you both for your excellent, steady, and witty journalism in Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you for enjoying our witty humor. It's not really an intentional decision. Well, it is kind of an intentional decision, you see, because the streams actually started off incredibly serious. I would cover the news, and that was the news. But then I made one joke, and I did it because, it was getting to me a little bit to keep so serious on such doom and gloom things in a war, and, just have to look at them for what it is, kind of. And so I made a joke on stream, and people loved it. And so I always try and throw in a couple of jokes here and there. I don't try and overdo it too much, but I am glad that you do like them, because that's always something that I'm wondering about is, do they come off as bad? And then, every once in a while I try and bring up stuff on the stream to kind of explain why there are jokes flung around here and there, because even soldiers on the front lines dealing with what they deal with also throw in jokes, so that way it doesn't get to them as well. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and I thank you very much once again for the support, and also enjoying this channel to a huge deal. It helps us out a great load to everyone who does support us, and it means a lot to us because it helps us to keep on running. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and with that, we're going to move on to the next one. Also, before we move on to the next one, I see a lot of people requesting no politics in the chat, and I'm going to make this spill again, but at this point, I think we're going to have to get a little bit more militant about how we say it. There aren't supposed to be no politics in the chat, specifically American politics, and that also extends to other nations' internal domestic politics. Politics is pretty much a dividing divisive thing these days that people use to troll others and cite them into fights and arguments. And on top of that, this stream is focused on Ukraine and the actual war that's going on within the country, and not trying to use the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dead people at this point, as a pedestal in American politics to try and further some kind of goal, or in the politics of another country like Britain, France, Germany, or whatnot. So we don't allow politics, and if we see anyone mentioning politics in any way, shape, or form, mentioning a specific person in any government and in any country, saying this person does better than that one, and if he was in charge, he'd do this, we are going to ban, because this is not supposed to be about politics. And I keep on seeing that we have people coming in trying to stir the pot and cause fights and trouble and disarray in our live chat by trying to pretty much fight people over political positions. And so with that, I hope that political speech is appreciated. We once again want to instill order a little bit in the live chat, make sure that there's not bloodbaths going on down there, because whenever politics is involved, it always becomes a slaughterhouse, especially these days. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, I want to recognize a $50 donation from Hellpug. And Hellpug does not leave a comment, but we know that Hellpug is a longtime channel viewer and supporter. So thank you very much, Hellpug, for that. And guess what? The Enforcer is going to add in 2 bits as well.
That's right. I always got to add in a little bit of 2 bits. And of course, I thank you so much for the support, Hellbug. You've been around for a while. I almost called you Hellbug. I think I may have Hellpug. But of course, it's greatly appreciated. And I thank you so much for being a viewer. And I thank you so much for the massive amount of support. I wish that everyone would have a question, but the support is good enough, and I appreciate it greatly. And so thank you once again, and I hope that does address it, at least in a way. There's not much to address, it's just support, but we're always appreciative of it nonetheless. Also, one other thing, I want to apologize real quick about the way I just addressed the political thing. I haven't really seen anyone have a problem with it, but the thing is that it kind of came off as hostile. But at some point, when you see the same thing happen over and over again, it just starts to wears on you a little bit. And so sorry to everyone who may have taken a little bit of an offense to that. No offense was intended. Just trying to make sure there's no politics in our stream, because that's kind of what we pride ourselves on, is that there's really not supposed to be any fights or arguments over politics. We just report what's going on, and that's it. So with that, and also we're not trying to detract from the war with politics and use this war as a pedestal and a soapbox for some kind of a pitiful small amount of, dribble going on in some country like the United States. And so with that, I hope y'all understand, and we're moving on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Ashley, who says, thanks to you and Matt for all you do. How far do you think Belarus will get if they invade Ukraine?
I don't think they get far. They're really more of a police force, a heavily armed one at that. And we've already seen one Belarusian tank get captured on the Ukrainian front line somewhere in the east of the country and get towed away. So based off of that perspective, of the first time we've ever seen proof of Belarusian forces in Ukraine and their tanks getting dragged off, I would assume they wouldn't do well. On top of that, their budget is incredibly small, and we know that there's a large amount of corruption within the Belarusian government and military, and also the morale is incredibly low. And that's one of the main reasons why the Belarusians have not invaded, is because their military is pretty much mutinying and refusing to invade Ukraine. So with that, I hope that does address the question, at least in a small way, and give a bit of a brief answer. But that's as much information as I know about that at the point, and that's why the Belarusians haven't invaded yet. And if they did, I believe their soldiers would pretty much just not fight hardly, or if they did fight, they would just abandon their vehicles and retreat. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Notorious GRG, who says, I'm notoriously on a tight budget, being on Social Security, and I try to save my donations for your fundraisers every Sunday. But if I could add a 0 to this, I would, because you two boys deserve more.
Well, I thank you so much for the support. That was a really kind thing to say. And of course, we always greatly appreciate any amount of support. And so whether it had an extra 0 behind it or it is what it is right now, we're more than appreciative for any amount of support you give. And just the fact that people enjoy our channel enough to continue to support us means a lot. And so I thank you so much. And it's okay. It's fine. I mean, like, we're more than happy with anything we can get. And we're so appreciative that you just enjoy the channel enough that you want to see it keep on going. And so I thank you so much once again. Those words were incredibly kind. That's actually made my day right there. And I got to thank you once again. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question, but I thank you so much for the support.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Uper Jim, who says, will the discount Lukashenko join the battle with his Cold War relic army? Keep up the great work.
Well, I thank you for the support. We had a question like that just a second ago, but to answer this one, no, I don't think so, because the Cold War relic army is kind of in a Cold War relic mindset of the Ukrainians are pretty much the same as them nearly, and the war is kind of pointless. And so they pretty much refused to fight so far, and based off of our information, that's why Belarus never joined the war, is because the Belarusians never got any support in the military, and the military practically mutinied against going into this war. And so Lukashenko kind of has had his hands tied where you can't do anything because the military is practically refusing to do anything. But then at the same time, the military is not overthrowing Lukashenko, because then the Russians would get involved, and then there would be a bloodbath in Belarus as well. So with that, I hope that answers the question in a brief way, but that's about my understanding of why the Belarusians haven't joined the war yet. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question, but I thank you once again for the support.
And our next question is from Junebug, who puts in an $18 donation. And this is actually Junebug72, excuse me. Almost called you the wrong person. But anyways, Junebug with the 72 on the end says, I'm glad this current carer endeavor is getting bigger and better for you boys. Congrats. And this said, can we move to 100,000 to 50 for face reveal? Bye-bye and thank you.
No problem at all. I thank you so much for the support, and it's of course our pleasure. And to answer that question, we were planning on doing 50,000 as a face reveal, but then we blew past that really quickly. And then on top of that, we were getting death threats at the time, a pretty good deal, and so it's kind of reluctant about doing it then. But as times continue to churn and roll forwards, I have been thinking about doing the face reveal again. On top of that, apparently people have found my social media accounts, and so they just, they kind of already know who I am, and if anyone wanted to kill me, they would have already found out what I looked like, who I am, and a lot of personal information about me. And so face reveal is back on the table again. But I'm wanting it to be a little bit more in the future. I'm wanting it to be around 100,000, so that way there's an actual number tacked to it that will make it a very celebratory occasion. That'll be the moment that I get the silver play button, if YouTube gives it to me, because they sometimes don't give those things out. But if they gave me one, I would be getting a silver play button, and then it would be a huge deal, because 100,000 subscribers on any channel is huge. And so if you would like to see my face faster, share these streams and share this channel with your friends and tell them to subscribe, because the faster we get to 100,000, the closer we get to a 100,000 subscriber face reveal. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the question, Junebug. And I hate to tell people an answer like that, but I promise you, the faster we get to 100K, the closer y'all will get to seeing my face. And so with that, I hope that answers the question. And I thank you so much once again, Junebug, for being a longtime channel supporter and also being here since the dawn of time. I think you've been here since the Leaf Spring thing actually occurred on stream. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And I thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Exploring with Zunos, who says, my wife, who was born in the Soviet Union, is disgusted by the war. Her male family members still buy into Russian propaganda, but we both support Ukraine, and thank you for the daily updates. Love from Seattle.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and I have to agree that probably, well, I can't say that because a lot of people who are very old and lived during Soviet times in Russia support the war. But it's good to hear that there are people of every kind that don't support this war and can see through what's going on and what's happening. And it's great to hear, of course, that you're from Seattle. I've never been to Seattle, but I've heard that Washington State's a pretty place, at least in the countryside. And I would like to go there and see it one day because it does sound nice. But I do thank you very much once again for the support. And it's good to hear that there are people who used to live in the Soviet Union and actually live over there that are from the surrounding areas that don't buy into this stuff. And it's good to know that it is see-through. And a lot of people who have a little bit of sense in them and a little bit of reasoning can see that there's really no point to it. And so I thank you so much for the support. And I hope that does address the comment. And with that, how many super chats do we have left, Matthew?
We have just one left.
All right, and with that, we're going to answer this one last super chat, and then we're going to answer as many live chats as possible, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream.
All right, and the last one goes to GNF, who puts in a $2 donation and says, "Let's tell Russia we don't do deals with terrorists."
That would be a really good one to say. I think that would be pretty funny. I don't know if it would turn out well for us in the long run, with the nuclear war and all, but that would be pretty hilarious to say it to them and then start committing actions against them like they were, say, the Iraqis or, the Afghans and whatnot. So I thank you so much for the support, and I also thank you for sharing that with us, because honestly, thinking about that in context, that's pretty funny. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we're going to move on to live chat questions. We're going to answer a decent amount of them, and then probably in about, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes, we're probably going to round out the stream. And so with that, on to our first live chat question.
And our first live chat question goes to John A. Underwood, who says, "We have 2 Americans who were captured or held hostage. What do you know about that?"
We did have 2 Americans that were captured or held hostage. We heard that one of them was called Hate and one of them was called something else. Apparently that's their code names, but apparently they were captured near the Kharkiv area, and we haven't heard much news beyond that. Apparently they've been missing for weeks as far as I can tell, and now they're finally raising the alarm, which is something that I'm kind of like wondering about if that even is true. We'll see. We'll see. Of course, if they're in Russia, they will be put on TV and paraded around like some kind of a show animal or something like that. But I haven't really covered it today because there's not enough hardcore information to show that that's true, and we always generally rely on video evidence on this channel to report. So we're going to wait for some video evidence on it, and once we do get that, I'll be able to confirm whether it's true or not. But right now, it's something more of a an unsubstantiated rumor than it is fact. But I do thank you for the question. I hope that does answer it, and we will be trying to keep apprised of that situation, and if it does develop into something with video evidence attached, we will include that on the stream. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Pakatang, who says, "Enforcer, should the U.S. stop oil exports to lower the gas prices in the U.S., even if it would exacerbate gas prices in the rest of the world?"
I'm not really certain. You see, that's a tough one to answer because I'm not really into oil economics much. You see, even when we were producing a large amount of oil in the United States a while ago, and we were considered energy independent, we were still exporting a large amount then. We're always exporting. No matter how much of a shortage we have or how much of a surplus, we're always exporting oil because it's a source of revenue for oil companies. And so they, of course, try and make money. So I don't think there's a way to actually stop them from exporting, because you would either have to tell them that the United States will pay more for their oil than what they're already getting, and then that means that oil prices may still go up. And on top of that, we may be losing some of our economic control over other countries that we're exporting our oil to, where we will no longer be able to say, hey, if you don't do this, we're going to stop shipping oil. We're going to embargo you and make sure you can't get any oil. We wouldn't be able to do that anymore because we already pulled that stop out before we could even use it. So, I mean, like, there are some advantages. The gas prices may go down, but at the same time, we may lose, I guess you could say, political influence over other countries around the world that may be somewhat unaligned to us and maybe even unfriendly with us. So I hope that does answer the question. There's an equal side to everything. There's never a clear answer to a question like that. You could go either direction, and it may work out in the end. So I hope that addresses the question, and I thank you very much for the support, and I think that's about the best. Yeah, I think that's about the best I can answer it, because it's a very complex question, really, with how exports and imports of oil work. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question, but I hope I answered it to the best of my abilities, and take it with a grain of salt, because on this matter, I'm going to say I am no professional whatsoever. I'd have to look into it a decent bit, and so I'm going to have to just go with that as my answer, but just know it's largely uninformed. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Kevin Brown, who says, "Enforcer, I figured I'd ask early since I didn't get to it yesterday. I heard the French Navy was headed toward the Black Sea. Are there any updates about it, and for what purpose?"
We haven't heard any updates about it. Usually naval maneuvers are always kept confidential. We never really know where the carrier task forces are until they moor at a port around the world, so they could be anywhere. And so that's how the U.S. Navy operates, and I believe that may be how the French Navy operates. And so we're not going to know any information on the French Navy until it passes either through the Strait of Gibraltar, the Bosphorus Strait, or until they pass straight through Istanbul itself. Until then, we're probably not going to know much about them because they may be keeping their fleet movements a secret of, in terms of national security and such. So with that, I hope that answers the question, and we're on to the next one.
And real quick, I want to recognize a $20 super chat that just came in from Gary Robbins, and he did not leave a comment. So thank you very much, Gary, for that support to the channel, and thank you for being a viewer as well. And Enforcer, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, I always just wait for you to say that, but I thank you so much for the support, Gary. I'm sad. It's sad to see you don't have a comment or a question attached because I always like to try and address them. But of course, the support is greatly appreciated and always helps to keep this channel running. And so I got to thank you once again because it does mean a lot to us, and we're always greatly appreciative for every bit of support we can get. And I think I've seen you around a pretty good bit and for a pretty long while. And it's always great to know that we have viewers who always watch the stream and rely on it as their primary source of news. And so with that, we're on to the next question, and I thank you so much once again for the support.
And we now have a question from Teluvian, who says, Enforcer, what are the chances that Belarus is supplying equipment to Russia, but not troops?
They may. That's a good question. They may be supplying the tanks alone. But at the same, yeah, I mean, like that would make sense. If they were supplying the vehicles, the Russians probably wouldn't try and clean the markings off. They would just spray paint them with Z's. That may be the case. And so I would say that going off of what I said last, that may have been a very big assumption of me to say that Belarusian forces were operating a Belarusian tank. It may have been a Belarusian tank operated by the Russians that the Belarusians are pretty much lend-leasing to the Russians because they're running out of tanks. So that's actually a pretty interesting way of looking at it, and that may actually be what happened there. And so I'm going to actually side with you there and say that that may have been a Russian tank that was given to them by the Belarusians. So with that, I hope that answers the question, and we're moving on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from CH, who says, Enforcer, have you seen any footage of citizens using Molotov cocktails? They made so many. What do you think they did with all of them?
I don't know what they did with all of them, and we haven't seen them using them a lot. We saw some being used early on in the war, people throwing them at like tanks and such. But I don't know what they would have done with them afterwards. I guess they would have just poured out the gas. And now knowing about their gas shortage, it's like, ew, it's like, that was kind of an unfortunate thing for them to use it all on Molotovs and put styrofoam in it and stuff like that because it made the gas unusable. But at the time, it seemed to be a pretty necessary approach. Ukraine thought they were about to enter a guerrilla war because the entire country was going to be overrun. But then that never happened, so I don't know what they did with them. But there's no real way to dispose of them safely without causing massive harm to the soil and killing off everything in it. So, sadly, I can't give you an answer to that, but they did make a massive amount of them. We've never really seen them be used. And so with that, we're on to the next question, but I do thank you very much for it because that was actually a really good one. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And moving on, we have a question from Zach Jeffers, who says, do you think Ukraine will retake Kherson sometime in the next couple of weeks to a month?
That's an uncertain thing because the Ukrainians have gotten this close to capturing Kherson before and have been pushed back a little. And so I can't really say with clear certainty whether they'd be able to do that within a couple of weeks or a month. It really depends on what the Russian situation is like. If they consider the southern front as a write-off, they may give it up. They may start giving up a large part of the front and start focusing everything over here on the eastern side of the country within Donetsk and Luhansk. That may be what they do. But at the same time, we don't know because they are holding on to this front and they have given the Ukrainians a little bit of resistance, and that's why we've seen that this finger isn't being closed as fast as it once was. And so with that in mind, they may be able to hold Kherson for a considerably long while. Once again, it is in a very strategic spot, and the Russians do have a vested interest in holding it, considering that for, one reason alone, it is pretty much a massive morale booster, and losing it would be a massive morale loss. And so I hope that kind of answers the question. And my answer to it is that I'm trying to find a good way to formulate the actual answer, but I think that the Russians will try and hold on to Kherson, and so it may be pretty difficult for the Ukrainians to take it, so I'm not really certain if they could take it within the next few weeks or months. I think only time would tell. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and we're on to the next one.
And real quick, while I get rid of that night, that cam bot, actually, that's the second time it's visited tonight. So actually, it's been kind of quiet. But next up, we have a question from Kenneth Watterson, who says, "Did the Russians really take back Kharkiv?"
The Russia, no, they never took back Kharkiv. They're in the northern Kharkiv pocket, which is still in the Kharkiv Oblast, but they've never gotten close to taking Kharkiv again. So the answer to that is no. So with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a question from Agent Pepsi 1, who says, "Can you tell me when the Russians will send in the T-34s?"
Probably within the year, because they're running out of modern tanks at a pretty fast rate. So with that, a pretty good joke. I think we've heard that one before on the channel, but it's still a good joke. I like it. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Robert Harrington again, who says, "How many Americans have joined and or helping in Ukraine?"
We don't know a specific number, but we do know that it apparently ranges within the couple of thousand. And unfortunately, I can't really go further than there because those numbers aren't made public. So with that, I hope that answers the question, and we're going to move on to 3 more questions, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream.
Okay, and our next question is from Kenneth Watterson again, who says, "Enforcer, is Russia really losing a lot of troops?"
At this moment, compared to what the Ukrainians may be losing, they're actually losing an equal amount of troops per day, somewhere in between 100 to 150. So at the beginning, they were losing a massive amount of troops in comparison to what they were inflicting on the Ukrainians. But as time has gone by, we've seen that the Russians are starting to lose an equal amount to the Ukrainians. So in context, right now, no, they're not. They're really losing on par with the Ukrainians. But in the overall big picture, they've been losing a massive amount of soldiers compared to the amount of losses they've inflicted on the Ukrainians. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Duncan VR, who says, "This is my question. What is in a Russian soldier's field kit? I would assume it's washing machine, running shoes, spam, and what else?"
Don't you dare insult spam like that. I would never allow spam in the pocket of a Russian soldier ever. But I think if I had to conduct the Russian soldier's kit out of stolen stuff, it would be cologne for a little bit of an alcoholic buzz. It would be a washing machine, just because we all know about washing machines. It would be most likely some Ukrainian money that they stole out of some place somewhere, God knows where, and maybe some lingerie because they're depraved like that. So that would be what I would consist a Russian kit of. And with that, I hope that answers the question. That was actually a pretty good one, and I hope that was a pretty equivalent answer to it. And so with that, we're going to move on to one last question from the chat, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in a question?
So the lucky last viewer of the night just happens to be a moderator as well. This question goes to Crazy Boy, who is a channel moderator, who says, "Enforcer Matt, wait, if they run out of the T-34s, do you think they'll pull out the BT-7s?"
Oh, that's a pretty good question, Crazy. Honestly, I don't think they have a lot of BT-7s left. Most of them are museum pieces, and there's very few of those. So I think they may, but at that point, the Ukrainians are on the gates of Moscow. But I think at that point, they probably would pull everything out, including the mouse at the Kublinka Tank Museum, which I think is in Ukraine. Let me pull that up. Kublinka Tank Museum. It is in Moscow. Oh, well, I got that really wrong. It's in Moscow. So yeah, if they were at the gates of Moscow, they would be pulling everything out of the Kublinka Tank Museum. So with that, I hope that answers the question, Crazy. And also, by the way, everyone, I actually streamed with Crazy today earlier on and played a little bit of War Thunder with him. It was really fun, and I highly suggest that y'all go and check Crazy's channel out. And also, if y'all do enjoy gaming and just like to watch things for fun, make sure to go subscribe, because he does play a decent amount of War Thunder, which is a pretty fun game. And so with that, I hope that answers your question, Crazy. And hey, you were picked. And so with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much for watching once again. It has been a pleasure for me to report the news. And of course, I hope that all of y'all have appreciated the news. I'm sorry, I'm losing my mind over here. My brain's not hardly working anymore. But of course, it's been a pleasure. And if y'all are new to the stream, please make sure to subscribe. We do run these streams every single night. We also run summaries around later on in the day, about a few hours before the stream, which shows some of the highlight videos of the war, and I highly suggest y'all check them out. With that, I am pretty exhausted tonight. The power outage stressed me out a pretty good bit, but luckily everything pulled together and we were able to put the stream back up. So I thank you all once again so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great night. And I'll see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to report the day 113 news of the war in Ukraine. I thank you all once again, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Good night, and take care.
Ночь